We are in Paris attending the NECSTouR General Assembly, and we have together with us Mr. Xavier Font, Dr. Xavier Font, who is a professor of sustainability marketing at the University of Surrey.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mr. Font, we know that leisure tourism is actually now a necessity for people who are working in the demanding societies. So, in academics, we know that they often speak about over-tourism or under-managed tourism flows, depends on the side you are. So, what do you think that each sector of the travel industry should do in order to reduce the industry's negative impact on destinations and societies?
It's a very good question. And it seems to me the first thing that we need to do is to acknowledge that every single one of our sectors of the tourism industry has positive and negative impacts. We have a tradition of accounting for the positive impacts, normally measured in number of jobs we create, number of expenditure from those visitors, and our politicians and our media tend to focus mostly on that. I think it's important that we do a full economic accounting, so we count the costs as well as the benefits. Because you wouldn't run your house by counting just your benefits and not the costs, right? That's not how our bank balance works, right? So if every industry has to be accountable for the costs they're producing on society, then we will then have a much more true picture of what's really going on. And at the moment, I would argue that's not what's happening.
Okay. Do you have data about this, about the impact? Let's say how we measure the impact of our industry.
The European Commission has made very clear, and every Minister of Environment across Europe has already agreed that we have to decarbonize every sector of the economy, including ours, by 55% by 2030. We've got 7 years left. We have to find a way of making the same money, but with 55% fewer resources being used to do so. You don't have to be very good at maths to know this is not going to be easy.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
But until now, we have not really measured properly what the impact of our, the carbon impact of our tourism industry is. There are ways in which we can make our sector much more efficient. There are ways in which we can change the way in which we target certain markets, selecting different target markets. So I absolutely agree with you. Everybody has the right to travel, but nobody has the right to destroy the planet for the next generation. That's just not fair. So we can gain our leisure, our need for recharging our batteries, to restoring ourselves in many different ways. We don't have to go for binge traveling, right? Think of tourism as you think of wine.
Okay.
A glass of wine is really good for you. Drinking 3 bottles per night is not.
Definitely. But do you have any examples to show us about how the carbon footprint works in the tourism industry?
In sense of the majority of the carbon footprint comes from our transport.
Okay.
So particularly airlines, cruise lines, and road transport will be responsible for the biggest proportion. Depending on how far you go, it could be 50% or it could be 80% of your carbon footprint.
Okay.
This is followed by the carbon footprint from the accommodation of the places you visit. And then there's this much smaller carbon footprint that comes as a result of the activities you do while you're at the destination. So every destination that is promoting weekend breaks, for example, has a very high carbon footprint for the economic benefit the destination will receive. You're from Greece. You remember when people used to come for 2-week holidays.
True.
And then they did the same trip for 10 days. And now they do it for 7 days. And now coming to Athens for a weekend break seems like a very normal thing to do. The economic benefit for Greece is getting shorter and shorter, less and less. The carbon footprint is almost the same because the flight is the big culprit here, right? So actually we are increasing the carbon footprint from our sector per unit of euro that we are earning in the destination, when what we should be doing is totally the opposite.
Okay, great. So if I would like to ask you, what is the actual value of the impact of tourism development on the environment and the societies in terms of resources that are spent, or money, or social? And what is your opinion on this type of impact compared to the man-made environmental impact that a war conflict is bringing, or a tanker that is sinking is bringing, or industrial pollution, let's say?
So this is a very peculiar question in my view, in the sense that we always are trying to compare things that are not necessarily comparable.
Okay.
One is avoidable, the other one is not.
Okay.
We know the tourism industry creates 10 to 12% of the world's jobs and is responsible for about 8 to 10% of the world's carbon footprint. And there are many other things that cause a carbon footprint. Some of them are preventable and some others are not preventable. Right? Nobody desires for a war to happen, but they happen nevertheless. Now, we could basically say, well, tourism is not the worst because look, it's only 10%. But turn it around. Tourism is not necessary. Agriculture is necessary. We need to eat. Heating our homes is necessary. Traveling to work is necessary. Tourism is what we do when we're already rich. If you think about it, 2% of the people in the world travel regularly, and they're causing 10% of the world's carbon footprint. Right? There are a lot of very poor people in the world that will never travel, but they will have droughts, they will have heat waves, they will have unexpected rainfalls, and they will suffer the consequences. So the rich people who can travel are not the ones whose lifestyle is going to be fundamentally affected by the consequence of their own actions. It's going to be the people who didn't participate or didn't benefit from travel, but they are the most vulnerable in the world, and they will pay that price.
Okay. So I heard that you have done a research recently in the University of Surrey regarding how the COVID period actually affect the travel industry in regards to employment, socio-ecological impact, etc. And what should we do to speed up the recovery?
Well, recovery is an interesting question in itself. We're assuming that the form of tourism that we had before COVID was the appropriate form of tourism, and therefore we should go back to doing just what we did beforehand. A lot of people have talked about using this period as a moment of reflection to say what type of tourism we want to have. But nevertheless, every government has rushed to go back and trying to regain the volume of visitors that we had before, irrespective of whether that was a good idea or not. Now, what we noticed in the research that two of my colleagues at the University of Surrey did, Yanning and Sheena, basically was that as a result of tourism, women lost employment much, much faster than men lost their opportunities for employment in tourism. And also, women were the ones that were put under much more pressure in having to have additional work in their home, in caring responsibilities, as well as keeping their jobs. Because women always have much more precarious work conditions than men. They're much more likely to work part-time work hours, on 0-hour contracts, on lower, much more, kind of unstable situations. It was much easier for companies to let those people go in the first place. And the people that didn't go necessarily, because very often women in a family household will earn less than the husband. If somebody had to give up their work, it was them that did. So the amount of work-related anxiety as well as work-related instability that women suffered as a result of COVID was much, much greater. We found evidence of this in 4 different countries where we did our research. Mexico, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Jordan, very different countries in the type of tourism models that they have, and nevertheless, they all suffered similarly. Now, there has been a recovery since then, but actually many women recovered by leaving the sector and looking for more stable work situations. And we're noticing this now when we realize post-COVID, actually we have a shortage of people who want to work in our sector. And many people have left tourism. They've said, I am never going back to tourism. And we're finding it harder than ever to encourage 17-year-olds to say, I will do a professional qualification or a university qualification to choose these as my sector for the future. All of which is not a cause, but is symptoms of the fundamental problems that we had as a sector and the unfairness that there was in our sector, the poor working conditions that we had in our sector. So we cannot blame COVID for the problem. COVID just made it much more obvious. And people said, enough, I want to work elsewhere.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.